All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, in a recent Politico magazine profile, Obamaland issued what sure appears to be a warning shot. Apparently, the former president doesn't intend to weigh in on the Democratic presidential primary, with one notable caveat. Apparently, he would have to speak up if Bernie Sanders was on track to win the nomination. This is according to Ryan Liz's reporting. Quote, Obama said privately that if Bernie were running away with the nomination, he would speak up to stop him. His aides are also at the ready to speak out about a rising Sanders. Here's Liz again. When it comes to Sanders, I asked one close advisor whether Obama would really lay himself in the line to prevent a Sanders nomination. Quote, I can't really confirm that, the advisor said. He hasn't said that directly to me. The only reason I'm hesitating at all is because, yeah, if Bernie were running away with it, I think maybe we would all have to say something. But I don't think that's likely. It's not happening. Another close Obama friend said, Bernie's not a Democrat. Bernie's not a Democrat. Obama aides have apparently been reduced to co-opting the dumbest argument ever made on Twitter. And they're right. Bernie's not a Democrat. But what they have never reflected on is that what that says about the Obama Democratic Party, that the most popular Democratic politician today is not even a Democrat. I mean, consider this. As the horrors of the Trump presidency have unfolded, Obama has been largely silent. Whether it's the Muslim ban, the full-throated embrace of white identity politics, or the repugnant child separation policy, Obama's either looked on and said nothing, or he's issued a meek and cautious statement. It says everything that he apparently feels so strongly about a Sanders candidacy that he would come out of hiding and deign to dirty his hands with the rough and tumble world of politics. Heaven forbid we have a Democratic standard bearer who will fight with the insurance industry rather than give them more customers to gouge, who will actually enshrine the right to unionize rather than only paying lip service, who will cancel the medical debt and the student debt that are crushing our people. To those who are looking to upend the status quo, though, this really is a wake-up call. We should not be so naive as to think that the Democratic establishment is just going to go quietly into the night. It's no accident that this article comes against the backdrop of a decided Sanders surge. When it comes to their confident assertions that Sanders will never be the nominee, methinks they doth protest too much. They can't have missed his rise in the polls. A brand new Emerson poll out this morning has him in first place in the critical Granite State. Hilariously timed, given that the New York Times just wrote a big piece this week about his supposed struggles there. This poll is part of a trend that has seen Bernie overtaking Warren and gaining ground on Biden nationally and in the early states. He also has incredible popularity with young people, especially young people of color. That's, of course, the core demographic that gave Obama his victory in 2008. And the commitment of Sanders supporters surpasses that of all other candidates. It's no accident that Obama was recently out deriding the activist left to wealthy donors. The ground is being laid for a full-on establishment assault of Sanders should he climb any higher and genuinely threaten for the nomination. So what might that look like? Well, one thing that's important to realize is that not just Obama, but many of the elite preservers of the status quo in the Democratic Party would rather see Trump reelected than Bernie as president. Some of them have even said it outwardly. Donnie Deutsch gave up the game when he said he'd rather vote for Trump than a socialist. Everyone in the donor class that I know is never Bernie. Remember, they're all making money under Trump. That includes Obama. That includes the oligarchs. That includes the professional managerial class. And that's why Obama, who stayed silent through all sorts of Trump-era atrocities, feels that he simply must intervene if Bernie had a shot. After all, nothing would be a bigger repudiation of Obama-era politics than for Democrats to nominate Bernie Sanders. Now, I'm not trying to encourage conspiratorial thinking here, but I also think we should be honest about what the possibilities are. Look, the DNC put their thumb on the scales last time to get their chosen candidate, and you'll recall that Obama intervened in the race for DNC chair to put his friend and ally Tom Perez over the top. Do you really think these people have any qualms about intervening in any way they can to keep control of the levers of power and preserve the status quo? As one example of what could be in the works, Alex Perrine recently wrote an intriguing take on Deval Patrick's candidacy. In the current primary race dynamic, Deval's candidacy really has absolutely no logic to it, zero. But with Biden looking weak, Warren being disliked by the Obama people, and Sanders being an existential threat, perhaps Deval is a sort of insurance policy. He's close with Obamaland, and he's close with Clinton world. Could he be the vessel into which the establishment pours their aspirations? After all, the most powerful tool in Obama's toolkit is an actual endorsement. He could elevate a candidate from nothing with a single tweet. Now, here's the other possibility to prepare for. It's entirely possible that Sanders could win the most delegates, but not actually get to 51%. So he wouldn't win then on the first ballot. Do you think in that scenario, party elites will let him become the nominee without a fight? You can just imagine the argument that they'll make. It'll go something like this. Republican patriots should have intervened to stop Trump from becoming the nominee. Now that we have our own populist candidate whose ideas are un-American and who's a threat to the norms and guardrails, we must act out of principle to save the Republican. That way, democracy subversion can be dressed up as principled and patriotic. After all, they'll say he didn't win a majority vote. More people voted for not Bernie than for Bernie, so they'll cloak their undermining as executing the true will of the people. Now, a lot can happen between now and then, and counterbalancing their hatred of Bernie or anyone else who threatens the established way of things is their tendency to cowardice. Perhaps the Democratic elite and their media allies will just meekly accept Bernie's victory and move into cheerleading for him. Perhaps they'll count on their erstwhile friend in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, to block Bernie at every turn from stopping the bipartisan feeding frenzy at the oligarchic trough. But let me ask you, do you really see all the Bush-era neocons and Clinton acolytes and national security blob mouthpieces that fill out the ranks of the liberal networks these days standing by while Sanders claims the nomination? Instead, be ready for every form of dirty trick, smear, and cheating to be used, as well as jumping right over those revered norms and guardrails. Because at the end of the day, our bipartisan establishment owes its heart and soul to the Green Party, and I'm not talking Greta Thunberg-style green. Bernie is an existential threat to business as usual and both parties' ability to cash in as perpetual winners in the oligarchy, and they'll use every means, fair and unfair, to protect their position. So to those of you dedicated to upending business as usual, in case you had any illusions, Obama's comments prove that you better be prepared for the fight of your lives. Sagar, I really think these comments were like a warning shot.
Yeah,
they don't totally take him seriously yet, but you can see what's coming.
I had chills whenever you're talking about how that convention process could play out.
You could know that argument they're going to make.
I saw it in 2016. That's exactly what they said about Trump. Oh, not enough Republican people voted for him. More people voted against than other. It's our patriotic duty as a party in order to replace him. This is not who we are, blah, 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 blah. Guess what? He was the only one of them who could actually win. And you know what? I think that's the same thing about Bernie Sanders. I think Bernie's probably the only person who has a shot at beating Trump, or at least could give him a real run for his money. And you know what? At the end of the day, he is an existential threat to them, just in the way that Trump was an existential threat to the Republican Party establishment. And that is something that they don't go down easy. I mean, I watch these people pour hundreds of millions of dollars against him. I think they'll do the exact same to Bernie,
Absolutely.
if not more so, because frankly, Bernie is a pretty consistent guy. And it's like you said, it's going to be the fight of your life. Do you remember George W. Bush and H.W. Bush all leaking that they weren't going to they were voting for Jeb or they're voting for Hillary?
Yeah.
Same thing. The same thing happened. And you know what? Obama would just be following in that tradition if he were to go up against him.
Now, two things I would say is, number one, Obama has a lot more juice in the party than W did. Certainly. I mean, W had been completely repudiated by this point, whether he realized it or not. Number two, a lot of what the establishment would do to try to prevent Bernie would actually make him stronger.
Of course it would.
They would
That's
have
what happened with Trump,
and that's
too.
exactly
It's the same thing.
That's what happened with Trump. And I mean, you can see that already. Look, Michael Bloomberg getting in the race right now while Bernie Sanders is surging. This is not an accident, right? I think he's threatened by both Warren, but also Bernie Sanders. But guess what? Michael Bloomberg coming into the race is only good for Bernie Sanders. It only helps him.
Yeah, it validates the narrative that the oligarchy and that the billionaires and that the Democratic establishment will do nothing. They will stop at nothing in order to defeat a true existential threat to their power. And that's what he represents. I mean, that is what populism at its core represents. That's why they try their hardest to co-opt it, to shape it, to destroy it from over and over. They'll smear you. They'll try and destroy you. The former president of the United States will go after you. I mean, think about this. Barack Obama signed a $60 million book deal with his wife. Well, his wife went out on sold-out stadium tours, acting like a celebrity. Then they signed this Netflix deal. He's giving paid speeches to Wall Street. I mean, he showed us all his true colors. The first trip he took after president was to go hang out with billionaire Richard Branson on a private island while he was going jet skiing or whatever. I mean, Matt Stoller always says about this about him. He's an Instagram president. Well, that's what he is.
But you know what? The most prized, most valuable thing for Obama is his ego.
Yeah, I know.
And that's the thing that is most deeply threatened by Bernie Sanders, because if the Democratic Party, the base, actually says, you know what, we don't want to mess around with the Affordable Care Act anymore. We want Medicare for all. We're affirmatively going in this direction. We want the Sanders model of politics, not the sort of like triangulation. Let's get a grand bargain. Let's sit down on the other side. Nothing could more repudiate his legacy.
No, and Obama knows that. He said something in that article that he was quoted as saying that he used to have an intimate bond with the electorate that he no longer has. And I think he's beginning to understand that the country has moved far, far beyond him.
Yeah, which is at least self-aware.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, what could have been a more devastating political decision than him pushing Hillary as the heir to his legacy? I mean, you talk about a guy who came out of nowhere, 2008, like really did get it and capture this spirit of the moment, is able to get reelected basically on a critique of capitalism. I mean, bailing out GM and attacking Romney as a rapacious capitalist. That's what his campaign was, right? And he gets elected on that. And then to spend 4 more years in the White House and think that Hillary Clinton is the person who's going to be able to continue this legacy and be able to get elected, it just shows you, yeah, he's completely lost touch with the electorate that put him there. Next up on Rising, an estimated 3.6% of the U.S. population are undocumented immigrants.
So how are the 2020 candidates addressing the challenges of the current immigration system? The Hill's Raphael Bernal is going to explain next.